Throughout history, the weather has always been viewed as an act of God. Floods and droughts and storms and blizzards have come and gone for centuries with people powerless to intervene. But more recently, something's changed, and for the past 80 odd years, humans have actually started to fight back against the weather itself. How? Well, the simplest and most common way is through cloud seeding, where tiny particles are released into the atmosphere, around which water condenses until it gets too heavy and oops, now it's raining. Or, if these particles are very cold, like dry ice, then lots of little droplets will form instead, which are too light and so it won't rain. Now, that might make it sound easy enough, but it's a lot more hit and miss than that. There might not be enough water in the clouds, or the particles might blow away, or there might be too much water to freeze, and so on. And because of this, there isn't exactly a 100% consensus that cloud seeding is even a thing in the first place. But going with majority rule and assuming it is, we arrive at some pretty strange questions, such as... Now that sounds like an odd question, like asking who owns the ocean. But this has been a real issue before, such as in 1977 between the US state of Idaho and its neighbour Washington, or even internationally as recent as 2010 between Iran and Israel, when one party accused the other of cloud seeding and stealing their rain before it got to them. But did they have a right to do that? And perhaps the more apt question is not who owns the weather, but rather, do people have a right to the weather they may or may not get even if it isn't directly happening to them right now? But that doesn't make a very good video title. Maybe Iran or Idaho would have gotten more rain if Israel or Washington hadn't been cloud seeding. Or maybe they were never going to get that rain in the first place. But the real difficulty comes with that term stealing, because stealing implies ownership, and that implies that clouds can be owned in the first place. However, in short, some people equate clouds to rivers, which have laws about who owns what and how to share them responsibly, whilst others equate clouds to migrating birds, which just kind of happen and aren't really anyone's responsibility. Neither of these cases of cloud rustling found the defendant guilty. However, in the late 1950s, a similar case between a farmer and a research group ruled the farmer did in fact have the right to his clouds, so the rules are a bit all over the place. And what about in 1972, when the US federal government was sued for causing a flood? 283 people were killed in the flood, which occurred whilst the government just happened to be cloud seeding the area. But were they liable for that? Maybe they were being negligent, not preparing for the consequences of their actions, or maybe the flood was going to happen anyway and it wasn't really their problem. Again, this case surprisingly enough didn't find the government liable, but it's difficult to see how future cases may be judged. I mean, if the government isn't responsible for the weather in their own airspace, then who is? And after all, the weather can be dangerous and messing with it can clearly have life-threatening consequences. Speaking of which... Of course, this being about humans, weather manipulation has made its way into being a strategic weapon. And who better to give us a whistle-stop tour of how than the industry experts? The US classes the weather as one of the many WMDs under their large belt, as shown in a 1992 US Air Force white paper where they discuss the many fun ways they plan to use it, such as altering troop movements, changing reconnaissance, changing morale, changing cloud cover, and although we've been talking about cloud seeding up until now, there's a whole world of weather out there and the US wants all of it. So why not also cause droughts, cause storms, change fog levels, change space weather, which I suppose is still a kind of weather, or even just go down the New Zealand route and make a tsunami bomb. Though I think at this point the US and others could already do that if they really wanted to. And it's not like this paper was the first time weather manipulation has ever been suggested for military use. In World War II, the British used large oil fires to clear fog around airfields, which technically counts, and the US famously used cloud seeding as a tactic in the Vietnam War to increase rainfall and flood the Ho Chi Minh Trail, with reportedly impressive results. However, some people noticed this and took it to the UN, who decided that actually no, you can't use forces of nature to destroy ecosystems as a means of winning a war. Which everyone promptly agreed to, and there was peace and love and no more talk of the matter, right? No, of course not. Although the General Assembly signed up, not everyone did, and what's more, the wording of the convention is a bit vague. For example, hostile use of cloud seeding is illegal, but what happens if a country is in the middle of a drought and it turns out their neighbour who just so happens to be upwind from them was cloud seeding the entire time? Was it an innocent accident or was it part of a long-term hostile strategy? It's hard to tell. And on top of that, the strategic advantage of manipulating the weather could be enough to turn anyone's head. I mean, with this technology, you could destroy an entire nation's harvest, or cripple its functioning, or destroy entire towns without deploying a single troop, and wow, this is all getting a little bit much. Surely there must be better uses for this technology. Many people have suggested that this technology should be used as a tool for good as a means of fighting climate change and gathering resources, and even the UN Convention, which outlaws its use as a weapon, actively encourages its use for peaceful purposes. There are even some ideas out there for how this could be done. such as causing rain to cure droughts. If the world's getting warmer, then there's going to be a lot more water in the atmosphere, so we may as well do something with it. And in a similar vein, we can purposefully cause fog and then condense it back into drinking water. On top of this, we could trigger plankton blooms in the ocean, which would absorb CO2 but also possibly mess up major aquatic ecosystems, or even just reflect heat from the sun directly back into space, which theoretically could be done in any number of ways, such as creating extra clouds to reflect the sun rays, launching small mirrors into space, which is an awful idea, or sprinkling sulfuric acid in the upper atmosphere, which is also an awful idea, but for different reasons. These do all count as weather manipulation, but remember I said they were ideas. I didn't necessarily say they were good ideas. As you may have noticed, one or two of them have slight, massive problems, which could have hard to predict impacts on the entire world, so perhaps there's one final question we should really be asking ourselves above any other. Even with all our crazy future technology, we still don't really get the weather, and that could be a pretty big problem. We've already talked about how the US government may or may not have accidentally killed a few hundred people in a flood, but this isn't an isolated case of things going wrong. The British government also maybe accidentally killed 39 people in the Lynmouth disaster in 1952, and in 1947 the US Army tried to slow down Hurricane King, but accidentally sent it further inland instead. So scale these mistakes up to the size of the entire planet and you can see how there could be a bit of a problem. So it seems that, as with most delicate issues, there are clearly pros and cons of allowing people or nations to own and control the weather. On the one hand, we could accidentally or intentionally damage large parts of our planet beyond repair, destroy entire ecosystems, and kill millions of people. However, on the other hand, we're kind of already doing that, so we may as well try and fight fire with fire. Or maybe we should only allow it in moderation and for good reasons. But that just opens the door to more questions, such as, what is a good reason? For example, China used cloud seeding to prevent rain at the opening of the Beijing Olympics. Was that a good reason? Or what about the farmers who seed clouds to help their crops grow? Is that a good reason, even if it causes flooding further downstream? As with any technology, from fire to nuclear power, the potential behind weather manipulation is great, both positively and negatively. So perhaps after all of that, the real question isn't even who owns the weather, but rather should it even be owned in the first place?